Absolutely.
Welcome, welcome.
Yeah. I might mention it today in the panel, depending on how everybody goes. But I presented at a conference. It was a conference talking about geared towards the Latino comunidad in Chicago on Friday. And I talked about familismo as one of the cultural values and how it's important for, from my perspective as a social worker and a clinician, when we're working with Latinos who are going through therapy or working with social workers, how familismo is a strong, right, factor that can drive goals. And it's nice to see it also represented in your mug as well, right?
That is true. That is very true. And that's the way when you raise kids in United States of America, but you have in my case, the Costa Rican Latino values. It's a challenge, but they do become kids of I had read in a paper of a third world because it's a mix of a combination of two. And it's nice to see that they actually get those values very intensively, especially when you have the adult kids who make a point to fly home when it's necessary. Yeah.
All right, I think we have about 1 minute left to go. So I'm not sure, Miguel and Sandra, if you saw with the agenda, the way things will go. Yes, all right, great. I'll just let the attendees come in, and then once we start now, I think it's noon. Lena will kick us off.
Hello and welcome to our live stream from Pennsylvania Western University. This is our Café con Leche discussion. I'd like to welcome our panelists and turn it over to Alina Clark and Savannah Dorsey, who will be doing the introductions.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Café con Leche events in celebration of Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month. We would like to ask everyone to please turn off their cameras and their microphones so we can focus on our main panelists and speakers during this event, and we can turn them back on during the Q&A at the end. So my name is Alina Clark. I am the new Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Penn West Clarion's campus. The Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is dedicated to fostering an inclusive and supportive environment for all students, staff, and faculty. We like to celebrate Heritage Months like this in order to honor the rich histories and contributions of diverse communities while promoting dialogue and understanding across campus. I'd like to also introduce now my colleague and counterpart, who will talk a little bit more about herself and our event today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Savannah Dorsey, and I'm proud to serve as Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion on the Penn West California campus. As partly a Hispanic woman myself, today's discussion holds significance, and I'm honored to be here with you all sharing this moment. At Penn West, we believe in fostering inclusive spaces where diverse voices are celebrated. While we all come from many different backgrounds, finding our community and contributing to that shared sense of belonging is extremely essential. Today, we are excited to bring you this conversation titled Café con Leche, a space where we come together, just as we might over coffee, to discuss the importance of community, identity, and change. This year's national theme for Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month is Pioneers of Change, Shaping the Future Together, highlighting those who have paved the way for future generations in the spirit of unity, resilience, and innovation that defines the Hispanic Latinx experience. We hope this conversation reflects that spirit as we continue to explore how we can shape the future together. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly introduce Dr. Stephanie Diaz Morel, who can tell us a little bit more about how Café con Leche began here at Penn West.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I'd like to share this image here of un café con leche, right? Coffee with milk. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for the 4th annual Café con Leche panel. For the past 4 years, along with others, I have intentionally created this space to meet and organically discuss topics related to Latinidad and culture as students, staff, and faculty of Penn West. And I wanted to explore a bit about the why we have this panel and a discussion called A Café con Leche in Latinx, Latino, or Hispanic culture. Having a café con leche is a tradition that includes more than just enjoying a cup of coffee. Café con leche can be a way of life in Latino households, and it's very common to sit around the table at family gatherings to drink and enjoy for hours in conversation with un cafecito. Saying to someone, let's have a café con leche. You're inviting them into your home, but also into your life, to sharing a moment in time with them where you're practicing hospitality and having a deeper connection through conversation. As the coffee warms you up and makes you feel at ease, it allows for an opportunity to share in honest and meaningful conversations. And often over a café con leche, families, and friends who become family discuss their daily lives. They might share what they're struggling with, and even practice being brave and vulnerable with one another as they share in the joy and some of the struggles that life can bring. Now that I've explained a bit about the Café con Leche, before we move on, I would first like to acknowledge that there are many activities in our history who have advocated struggles, sorry, many people who are advocates, I should say, in our history, the Latino history, who have advocated, struggled, and fought for us as folks where traditionally we might have been allowed in academic spaces or other spaces. And it's thanks to their efforts that we are gathered here today to discuss Latino, Latinx, and Hispanic culture. And as we share this collective space, I ask you to consider making it a brave space. So some of you may be familiar with the term safe space, which in my discipline of social work, the term is derived from a trauma-informed approach where a safe space is meant to be where you can discuss topics surrounding diversity, social justice, and other topics that can be sometimes difficult to discuss. And the notion of the safe space is to help calm anxieties that might be associated with discussing these topics within society or our workplaces, or even in some of our homes. So as we move the discussion forward, I invite you to create this brave space where being vulnerable and being honest and open is welcome. And we're using this opportunity to learn and grow from one another. There is a possibility that something you might hear might make you feel uncomfortable. But that's part of the learning experience as well, right? Being in a brave space, vulnerability might feel uncomfortable. So I ask the panelists and those in attendance of viewing the recording to intentionally seek to learn from others' perspectives and experiences, to seek to learn from others' thoughts, as we all are humans sharing in this collective journey of life and existing at the same time and sharing the same space on Earth. We will collectively, hopefully, feel the warmth of the Café con Leche through this panel discussion as it was intended to be.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz-Morel. I'd now like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Bria Allen. Bria is a business administration student, master's student at Pennsylvania's California campus, and with a passion for leadership and community engagement. She also serves as the president of the Black Student Union and works as a graduate assistant for our Office of DEI. Bria is also the secretary on the Student Association Incorporated Board of Directors. She's also a member of the Student Center Advisory Board and is involved in both the Penn West DEI Student Leadership Council and the Penn West Leadership Academy. She's earned her Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a concentration in marketing and a minor in accounting from Penn West in 2024. And she'll continue to cultivate her leadership skills and dedication to fostering inclusive environments. Thank you, Bria, and she will be leading our conversation for the rest of our panel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to introduce our incredible panelists who will be sharing their insights and experience with us. First, we have Dr. Stephanie Diaz-Morel. Dr. Stephanie Diaz-Morel is an associate professor and the program director of the Master of Social Work graduate program at Pennsylvania Western University. As a bilingual and bicultural licensed clinical social worker and PhD level researcher, Dr. Diaz-Morel has dedicated her work to helping improve the lives of youth, families, adults within the Latino community. Dr. Diaz-Morel earned her PhD from Florida International University, where she was awarded a Student Scholar in Health Disparities Research Fellowship with CRUSADA, the Center of Research on U.S. Latina Drug Abuse and Addictions, funded by the National Institute of Health. Her work has been presented nationally and internationally in English, Spanish, and Spanglish to aid prevention workers, social workers, counselors, and medical professionals working with youth, families, and adults. Next, Dr. Sheila Lorenzo de la Pena. Sheila Lorenzo de la Pena is an assistant professor of art therapy in the Department of Psychology, Counseling, and Art Therapy. She was born in Guinas, Cuba, and immigrated to Miami when she was 9 years old. Her lifelong passion for the arts led her to pursue art therapy. The only member of her family to pursue graduate school, she obtained a Master of Science and later her PhD from Florida State University. She worked 13 years with adults living with chronic mental health illness in a forensic hospital. Her publications include topics on material use, adaptations, and applications for wellness. Dr. Lorenzo also coordinates community art events that are face-to-face and online. Presently an associate editor for the Journal of the American Art Therapy Association, she's events co-chair of the Pennsylvania Art Therapy Association and a member of the American Art Therapy Association. She is registered with the Art Therapy Credentials Board and a board-certified art therapy supervisor. We also have Dr. Sandra R. Trejos. Dr. Sandra Trejos is a professor of economics and assistant chair at Pennsylvania Western University Clarion campus and a Costa Rican native who became a U.S. citizen in 2018. She is a member of the International Who's Who Historical Society, Phi Eta Sigma, Phi Kappa Phi, and Beta Gamma Sigma. Dr. Trejos is a 2009 and 2010 Who's Who in America and a 2010 through 2011 Who's Who in American Woman. Nationally, Dr. Trejos received the Outstanding Latina Faculty, Service, Teaching, and Higher Education Award at the 2014 American Association of Hispanics in Higher Education, AAHHE, conference in Costa Mesa, California. Dr. Trejos, who is fluent in Spanish, has taught a course for Penn West in Costa Rica multiple times in the past. She earned the 2009 Clarion University Outstanding Faculty Equity Award, the 2010 Clarion University Faculty of the Year Award by the Student Athlete Committee, and in summer 2015, she received the Distinguished Faculty Award by the Clarion University Alumni Association. She is also a mentor for the American Economic Association Pipeline Summer Conference and the Diversity Initiative for Tenure in Economics, sponsored by the Social Equity Center at Duke University. Dr. Trejos is married and has 4 adult daughters. Joining us is Dr. Miguel R. Olivas Luan, former editor-in-chief of the Business Journal of Hispanic Research. Dr. Olivas Luan joined Penn West Clarion as a full professor in 2005. His research has appeared in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, with articles on diversity and inclusion in academic journals, scholarly books, and presentations and service in academic and practitioner-oriented societies, including the Society for Human Resource Management, the Academy of International Business, and the Academy of Management. Dr. Olivas Luan has also developed and taught diversity in management and marketing courses for Penn West Clarion's MBA and undergraduate programs, as well as Deggendorf University in Germany. His experience has led to service contributions at the university and other regional and national nonprofits, as well as a recent appointment to the diverse faculty that teaches leadership to young and mid-career PhDs of the Society for Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanic, and Native Americans in Science, also known as SACNAS, SACNAS, at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in the DC area. His background includes living and studying in California and Pennsylvania, where he has worked for over 2 decades. As a dual citizen of the United States and Mexico, he brings a multicultural perspective and passion for cultural exchange to his work. He loves playing songs in both Spanish and English. And last but not least, our student panelist, Bethany Diaz. Bethany is a first-generation college student at Penn West University, California campus. She is a senior majoring in criminal justice. She is fluent in both Spanish and English, Spanish being her first language. Bethany is the president of the Hispanic Student Association and member of the Student Leadership Council, vice president of Cal Catholics, and she is a student worker for the DEI Center. Welcome, everyone. We'll be discussing how each of our panelists, in their own unique way, have been pioneers of change and how they've contributed to shaping the future, or contributing to shaping the future. We've prepared several questions to guide today's conversation, and panelists, feel free to jump in with your insights. To ensure we have time for audience questions at the end, I kindly ask that we keep responses to 2 to 3 panelists per questions. So for our first question, Pioneers of Change emphasizes progress and collaboration. Can you share how your journey as a Hispanic Latinx individual has contributed to creating change within your field?
All right, which of the panelists would like to go first?
Do we raise our hands or do we just go?
I think just go, yeah.
On the top of my mind is how, at least in art therapy, like our field is so new and growing, but out of most of the professionals, Hispanics and Latinos make less than 7%. And so just being present and being seen and attending events that are, national conferences and speaking engagements, I think it's very important because we have a voice at the table. We're paving the way for the next generations, and students can see themselves in, faculty being present.
I think that is for me just being myself, being ourselves, being who we are, respecting our roots and our identity. It's very important to be a factor of change. Students, and for those of you who have kids, they can really tell if you're faking it or not, if you're genuine, authentic or not. And we cannot pretend to be someone else just to fit the box, since we are minorities, really. In my case, in a male-dominated career, which is economics, being the woman, the Latina, the person with an accent. I like to share at this moment a little bit of my background. I'm a Costa Rican. I was born, raised, did my undergraduate in economics in Costa Rica. My second language was French. I always thought I was going to study in France, but for people of faith, we propose and then God has something else for you. So too late not to have an accent in English when I actually learned. I became proficient in English at a, too late of an age not to have an accent. So just embracing who we are, I think people appreciate that. That's being my experience. So when we talk about progress and collaboration, the question is, how can we be factors of change? Well, just by bringing who we are in the most authentic way, wherever we are. It could be in the classroom, it could be among our colleagues. If we feel like culturally, we may need to warmly support a colleague in ways that are authentic and sincere, then let's do it. If we want to celebrate certain ways, let's do it. This is exactly what we're doing today, right? We're bringing our mugs. If we had not drunk coffee yet, I brought something else, but we are expressing who we are. And I think that when we do that, we can be factors of change, because then we bring this diversity that is needed. that makes people connect with us in ways that maybe otherwise would not happen. So bringing our identity, connecting in sincere ways, and embracing truly who we are with all of it, while adapting new factors of a new culture. In my case, and I keep doing so, although I have around 28 years of living in the United States of America. It's an everyday thing, and it's nice to see that people are actually eager to know, curious to know, and embracing differences. So that's my 2 cents for now.
Thank you, Sandra and Sheila, for sharing. So to share a bit about my journey as a Latina and how that contributed to changes in the field, I think we can begin by sharing some of the journey. So I am a first generation Latina, right? I am the youngest of 3 siblings and the only one in my family that was born in the US. And so as a result of that, I think that was a big driving force for me, right? I'm a person of 2 cultures. I'm someone who is from the US, but I'm also a Latina. And most of my life, I grew up in Miami. My parents immigrated from Argentina during a time of civil unrest. And so there was already this kind of history, right, of struggle and the intention of wanting to come to the US to create a better life for their family. So I was always raised with the notion of my parents telling me that if you dream it, you can do it, right? We came to this country, that was our hope for you all, and we're instilling this into you. And of course, there are many challenges that come with seeking higher education, right? So in my field in particular, I'm a social worker. Much of the work that I did as a student, right, when I was getting my undergraduate degree and then my graduate degrees, I was working in the community with Latinos and with other individuals as well, not just those who identify as Latino or have Latino heritage. And when I was working with those who, let's say, were Spanish speaking or Latino, whether it was someone who I was supervising or other students that I was working with as I progressed through my career and became, right, a professor and started teaching at the graduate level, there was always this connection, this notion of, I see you. Although our struggles might not have been the same, I understand being a person of 2 cultures. I understand um, my Latinidad or me as a Latino, how my culture might impact the field that we're working on. And you see also the need, right? So Sheila, for example, highlighted the small percentage of individuals that have Latino heritage or identify as Latino that are working within the profession. That's universal across the board, especially in the US, right? So having that opportunity to be a representation of that for someone who maybe didn't think before, I don't know if I want to be a professor. I don't know if I want to be in this career path, but then they see someone doing it. I think that has been something that's contributed to change in the field. Because I've had people come back to me years later and say, hey, because you did it, I gave it a try. Or because of that thing you said to me, right, the conversation we had, sometimes a more intimate relationship where we're mentoring them. So we're consistently seeing the person, right, building each other up. That's a great opportunity for us to create that change within all of our fields. But also knowing that our stories, a lot of the shared cultural context can help bring one another up. So I think that throughout everything that I've done in my field, it always feels very rewarding when there's opportunity to bring somebody else up and let them see that it's possible as well.
Thank you, everyone. We are going to move to the next question now. How has your cultural background and identity shaped your approach to overcoming challenges in your academic or professional career?
I think I'm going to give it a try here, since I've been, as you read in the bio, Maria, publishing in the field of Hispanic or Latino business and business research. And one of the most difficult things is for Hispanics themselves to publish about our own group is that we don't have, well, some might have more than others, a context to compare with. Many of us, like Dr. Diaz, have been the first in our family to do something, like be born in the US or go to college, or I think Dr. Lorenzo also mentioned something along those lines. And that was my experience too. My parents, because of the time they were at, they lived, even though they, I'm sure they could have made it, they could have gone through college and they had aspirations. They were not able to do that, but they instilled in my sisters and myself the notion that college would be a way to improve ourselves and to give better future to our families and so on. So that experience, the experience of coming from households where education was not traditionally a significant part. I think that's been one of the values that I have tried to instill also in my kids and my siblings, my nephews and nieces, and so on. And unfortunately, like Dr. Diaz, I believe, mentioned, no, actually, it was Dr. Lorenzo that mentioned the low percentage of representation in professions, especially within the United States. At this point, we're what, maybe 19% of the general population, Hispanics and other Latinx individuals. And in most professions, we are, in the best case scenario, 10%, 12%, unless we're talking about specific occupations or industries. Maybe if we see the hospitality industry, there you see an overrepresentation of Hispanics and Latinos. Construction is another industry in which we can see that a very, very large percentage of workers, and we're talking most of the time at the least developed, least educated layers of employees. That's where we can see a large percentage of Hispanics and Latinos. And of course, we also have geographic varieties, as you are, as most of us are probably very, very much aware. The United States is composed by so many regions. Here in the Northeast, we have a hard time identifying more Hispanic families and Latinos and so on, unless you live in certain pockets where you can see the immigration has been taking place. On the other hand, if we were in the Southwest, like you mentioned, I spent some time in California. I lived there. That's where I learned my English with accent and all. But there in California, they did not cross the border. It's the border that crossed them, as well as people from Arizona, from Nevada, from Texas. So that experience was a very different experience from the one that we have here, or the one that people in large cities like Chicago, like Houston, Dallas have had, vis-a-vis the experience that people in Boston or New York have. There are so many different ethnic groups also that we have. When we say Hispanics and Latinos, we are talking about Central Americans like Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, you name it. That's a very different experience from the one that our brothers and sisters from Argentina or Peru or Ecuador have had. And as you know, there's quite a few colleagues and friends that call themselves, for example, New Yorkers, because they have lived most of their life in New York, but their families, their roots hail from Puerto Rico or from Dominican Republic or other Western Caribbean nations and so on. So there is such a smorgasbord of experiences and ways to approach our professional orientation that it's very hard to put it all in one single well, I don't want to say recipe, but in one single lesson or one single package. There are so many there's so much diversity within our group that we need to start by acknowledging that, in my opinion. So thank you. I appreciate being part of this.
To pivot from what? I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, it's okay.
Okay. To pivot from what Dr. Olivas Luján just said, and since we've been together in the similar area of Clarion, the Clarion campus. We came around the same time, and we've been here for a while. Yes, I think that, and going back, it seems that we've been. My husband is also a professor in college towns that tend not to be so diverse. So we took that for granted, but then I realized it's a challenge that I learned to live with. So that's why I wanted to follow up on what Miguel just said, because in a way, it develops in you values that you don't even know you're working on, as it tends to happen with human beings, like the resilience and just being strong and working hard, and because you're comparing yourself with people who actually don't have total affinity with you, like you're like in these careers you're competing in a way, like healthily, but you have different challenges. You have a family back home, extended family back home, and yes, like Miguel said, I was the first one to leave the country and to complete graduate studies and so on, things that you don't even think of because you're so busy doing it. We're raising a family, and then you realize, oh wow, we've actually like done certain things that are not so normal, right? So then you realize, since the way of overcoming the challenges is the question, um, that naturally it helped me to connect with others like me outside of maybe a physical area, like right now. So like the American Society of Hispanic Economists, very refreshing because then I saw other professors, other female professors in economics that now we're friends with, and we now professionally talk and among ourselves, and we are part of a mentoring program among ourselves within the Commission of the Status of Women in the economics profession for the American Economic Association. So it's like, oh, okay. So we're speaking the same language. We have similar backgrounds. That's my takeaway for people in the audience. Is like, if you feel like sometimes like reaching out outside the comfort zone, let's do it. Like the world is big. United States of America is big. There are all kinds of networks that we can be part of. So and then you realize that since you have this unique story, like we all do, then you may become this mentor for others who are in the pipeline, and that's beautiful. So being part of yes, this association of mentoring for inclusion in economics, and you see the younger, again, in my case, female economists who are now in the job market applying for teaching positions, and being able to just give them hope. It's beautiful. Or being reached out by a student at the Clarion campus to start the Hispanic Latino Student Union because she sees that I may get what she's trying to do to bring the Hispanic and Latino culture. So we, at times, I think that, and I'm going to generalize because I think it's part of the human being. We take ourselves for granted when we're doing and working, but then it's good to stop and realize who we are and how our uniqueness, which every human being has, can be embraced and connected to others so that we can keep giving back to the community. I want to, before I don't have time to do that, appreciate Stephanie for having invited me to be part of this panel a few years ago, because it's a chance in this safe zone to share with the community who we are when we sometimes don't have the chance because we're busy doing what we're supposed to do. But it's beautiful because we need to recognize differences in the diversity, in the unity. So my 2 cents for now again. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Stephanie, would you like to add anything?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists for sharing again. You know, this conversation, I think especially what Dr. Olivas mentioned, and as well as you, Dr. Trejos, made me think about, I was transported all of a sudden to undergraduate. I think it was my junior year where I decided I was a psychology major, and my minor was in sociology and anthropology. So when I was in a sociology course and we were discussing the US Census and the projections of the US Census to where the current ways in which identities were defined, right? Black, white, Hispanic, there wasn't a lot of variation at the time and it was evolving. And so one of the projections was that by the year 2030, that the makeup of the US would look vastly different and that there should be an option for people to be able to check more than just one box of how they identify, because there were going to be, cross-cultural categories. That's how the US Census saw it. And it made me really start to think. So if I think from then to even just now, how the makeup of the US as a whole, but our little corner of the world here in Pennsylvania, what that looks like with the students and others we're working with, then we can see how it certainly has evolved. So in particular with cultural background and identity, I think the word identity is one that is an ongoing journey, right? We're finding out what that means to each one of us on an ongoing basis. And the journey never really ends, because there can be parts of yourself that you find out through exploration, through reading, maybe something you see in a movie, right? Makes you just kind of open your eyes. And in my particular circumstance, growing up, even in a city that was considered very culturally diverse and rich culturally, right? Because we have so many different people in Miami from all different countries, all different languages are spoken, and a lot of those intersectionalities. There were still people putting me in boxes that I hadn't even thought, oh, this is where I go, right? But that's the question. Is this where I go, or is this where people are putting me? And those are two very different questions, right? Where people put you versus where you go, how you feel, how you identify, and what parts of you make up who you are. So that is the lifelong journey. That is the ongoing journey. And through people putting me in other boxes, and I know this is, experiences that others have as well, I experienced some microaggressions, right? Where are you from? Where are you really from? Right? That would happen when I was maybe in like parts of the US where there weren't a lot of Latinos, because I had curly hair, but my skin is very fair. But when I open my mouth, it kind of sounds like maybe I speak another language. There's an intonation there. We're not quite sure. So through this kind of exploration, right? I think a lot of that shared experience helped to shape who I am, mainly because firstly, I know I'm not alone, right? There's different expressions of how someone might ask a question, their intention behind it. Usually it was some kind of curiosity. But if we broaden our perspectives to say, well, this is just how people are, instead of having those categorizations of other, right? For lack of a better term, or just to all encompass it. Listening to someone, letting them identify themselves, right? Then we really are ensuring that we're having more of that connection, that we're broadening our perspectives, and rather than otherizing a person, right? Oh, you're Latino. Oh, so you must speak Spanish. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, right? There's plenty of people who identify as Latino who do not speak Spanish. That doesn't make them less Latino, right? That's still their heritage and they can explore that. Maybe there's someone who, for a very long time, the understanding is, oh, you are Latino or Hispanic, and so you must be from Mexico, right? I'm sure a lot of us have heard that very common microaggression. No, absolutely not. As Dr. Olivas expressed, there are many countries that are Spanish speaking. And similar to how maybe you hear in a movie or you've, had the opportunity to travel around a bit, if you hear someone from New York, like in a movie, right? They might have an accent, especially if they're from Brooklyn or Long Island. I mean, even just the different boroughs is a different accent. Same thing with Texas, right? If you're from Texas, you have a different accent. Um, Similarly, in Spanish, we have the same kind of intonation. So growing up, I would hear different Spanishes from folks who are from Central America, from the Caribbean. So in a different language, I'd hear it, but you'd also hear it in English at times. So, this is a difference, but I think a similarity that can help us to kind of think of cultural contexts and identities and how also otherizing someone might make them feel negatively, even if you're coming from a curious place. So instead, having an opportunity to talk about identity, to talk about history, talk about culture, is a way to approach that where we wouldn't cause so much harm as opposed to otherizing. And just a quick little anecdote. I know we've used the term Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, right? So in the past, we've talked about this too. The wording is also a preference. There is a lot of history behind it. There's a lot of research behind it. There's intention behind it. So like the term Latinx is the gender neutral way that's actually been more Anglo-Saxonized, right? It's using English and Spanish, so it's more Spanglish to identify someone. So we use it largely here in the United States, and you might see it in a lot of research. You'll see it in a lot of, conferences and activities like these, where we are again attempting to be inclusive and making sure that the terminology matches those who are present and being good allies. The term Hispanic was actually developed by the U.S. Census. So I try not to use that term. I know it's a common one, right? Because we check that box. We've checked that box so many times in our lives. How do you identify? But we should think about the historical context. So the Hispanic is a term that was developed by the U.S. Census for us, not by us, right? No one was in the room saying, yeah, this is, and they did it because it was supposed to be a notion of the islands of Hispaniola, those who speak Spanish, right? And so the US Census developed this, but there was really no one in the room to say, hold on, we don't use that term, right? Or maybe we should think of something else. But it's and now luckily we're living in a world where there is more opportunity for someone to be in the room and to raise their hand and say, hold on, let's think about this. And so that's important to keep going, right? We need to keep doing that, whether you identify as that person or someone who can ally and said, hold on a second, I think we should focus group this. We should talk about the historical context before we label something or others. And the term Latino in Spanish is like community term that we use to identify people within, again, this kind of context. Latina is the female pronoun of that. And in Spanish, the gender neutral way to say it, the new term is Latin with an E. So when, for example, if I'm use the word Latino, I'm not referring to masculine notions or, those who are Latino that identify as male. I am using the word as a community word to kind of encompass everything that would be considered Hispanic in the US because of my bicultural, background, because of my bilingual background, and because of the experiences and research that I've done working in the community. This is the term that I feel to be the most inclusive. But I am, of course, always open and to using the term Latinx as well, because that is representative of what I know is important in others' identities, right? And what I think, with the experiences that I've gone through, and I know others have gone through, my attempt is always to try to use language and be the most inclusive as possible while considering my identities, my experiences, and those of others in their academic and professional careers as well. So I will be quiet now and let Dr. Lorenzo de la Peña share as well.
Actually, I want to give my space for Bethany. I think they had something they wanted to share before.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback off of what everyone's been saying, just like from the student perspective. I personally I grew up with those values as well. Like my parents migrated from Mexico and here, and I'm the oldest child. So automatically I am the first generation to graduate high school and to come to college. And that in itself was like a huge milestone, not just for me, but for my parents. So I think that that's something that's always been in the back of my head. Like every single time that something has come up on campus with professors or just any challenge in general with my academic career, that's always in the back of my head that like my parents have always said, we migrated here for you and for you to have a better future, for you to go to school and do something very, very big with your life so that you can have your future set for your future kids and everything. And I think that's always something that motivates me, to not let anything, like no matter how big the obstacle is or the challenge is, to always find the way out of it and not get stuck there. Because I think that a lot of the times as a first generation student, there are a lot of things just with like the process of going to college or graduating from high school. There's a lot of unknown things that if you don't, like for me, if I wouldn't have reached out to people and I wouldn't have found my way, how do I do this? How does this process work? Because my parents didn't have that experience, um, I had to find the way to do that. And I think that a lot of the times, I found myself not wanting to or being scared to because of what obstacles I was going to be faced with. So I think one of my biggest things have just been finding my voice and knowing that no matter what, there's always somebody that is going to support you. And just with being a student, I have found those 2 to 3 connections with faculty and staff on campus that I know that I can go to no matter what. But I think that as a student, it's very, very important to just find your voice and take your heritage and your culture, no matter what it is, and express it, not be scared to be who you are, speak the language that you know how to speak, because I am bilingual and I do speak Spanish. And to me, on campus, that has been really big because I've been able to help new students make videos in Spanish to send to them for like new student orientation. I've given tours as a translator for families with the new students and the parents. And I know that that's very, very big for parents as well.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. We are going to move on to the next question. So what barriers do you believe still exist in the Hispanic Latinx individuals in academia, and how can these be addressed?
Let me start take a crack at this because this is something I think I have seen more often than I wish. What some have called scarcity mentality. As if giving credit or receiving credit was going to essentially be deleterious on someone else, and of course this is a very human reaction, I guess. Sometimes when we see people receiving credit, the inability to share, to rejoice with them, to celebrate with those individuals, whether they're Latinos or not. But sometimes I do see it among us. I mean, this perhaps the fact that many of us have had to struggle to reach the places where we are makes us a little bit jealous of others reaching similar levels, and that is something that we need to change, quite frankly. The scarcity mentality that if somebody is being honored or recognized or receiving some kudos, then that should generate some kind of jealousy in me. It shouldn't. To the opposite, it's quite the contrary, that we should rejoice with them, celebrate with them, and make sure that we learn from them, get inspired by them instead of feeling jealousy or similar kind of feelings. Another one that and I'm going to not just mention a second one that I believe has to do with not just Hispanics, but also many other minoritized individuals, is this notion of, I believe it's a misplaced humility. We quite often minimize our achievements, put down our own achievements, I guess. I hate to use the same word twice in the same sentence, but that's essentially what it is. You know, these sometimes reluctance to say, to own what we have made possible, and you know, without bragging, because that's definitely something that Hispanics in particular, or Latinos and many others also have, you know, as a cultural value, not to brag, not to be the person that tries to put themselves as, you know, above average and so on. But on the other hand, we need to sometimes just acknowledge the fact that we have come a long way. And of course, we're not done. You know, there's a lot still to be done, and to achieve, to really make it better for ourselves, for our children, for people around us, for the next generations. But at the same time, you know, just recognizing that some of the things we have achieved deserve credit and deserve recognition. That is, I believe, also important. I'm going to stop there so that others can also share your thoughts.
Would anyone else like to add?
I can add a little bit. Thinking about what Bethany said sort of reminds me of one of the things that I was originally thinking about bringing in, which is that a lot of traditional programming, especially if we're thinking like at the graduate level, means for students to move out of their households and go live somewhere else, right? Like this separation from family and community and sources of traditional support for Latinos. And that I see as very challenging and almost part of the reason why we're not seeing more, you know, Latin students, why we're not seeing more students at the higher levels. And for me, what I've noticed since starting to work here at Penn West is that because our program is online, that we're starting to see more diversity in the student body, because they mention it like, hey, well, I can stay at home. I can still have a job. I can still support my family. I can still take care of the kids when I'm showing up to class, right? Like I'm cooking dinner and I'm listening to what you're saying, and I am commuting. I'll be in class right away, right? Like I feel like the traditional systems that haven't really been made for folks that are juggling so much, right? Like you're still maybe helping your parents, or your parents are aging and you need to be present. You can't move away to another state to take care of, you know, your education. You got to support, you know, the folks that brought you here, the folks that gave everything up, right? Like they gave up their families, they gave up their country sometimes. And so it's important to create these other avenues, these other more flexible ways of attaining, you know, education or whatever it is, certifications. And I think that is something that we ought to give, you know, some time and thought to, is how do we facilitate the processes in place to accommodate for more like, what's it called, like less traditional or not the traditional student.
I think to just piggyback off of what you just said, like as a student, one of the things that, like you said, it is true, like you do move away from home. And for me, being Hispanic and Latina, it's really hard to balance school on campus, knowing that even though home is only 45 minutes away, I'm still my family's rock. Like I'm still that person that is the bridge to make doctor appointments, to all the daily things that everybody does, doctor appointments, rides to the store. Like my mom doesn't drive, so I'm her personal Uber. And so with me being at school and having to balance like my schedule at school and then going back home, it is really hard. And sometimes things happen where like family members get sick and I can't always be in class and stuff like that. And I think that one of the challenges that I've had is just getting that connection with a professor where I can tell them what's going on and for them to truly understand that I can't have a medical excuse as to why I won't be in class this day, but this is my reasoning. And that's one of the challenges that I've seen as a student. I'm a senior now, but I know that for me, that's something that has really been a challenge, is just trying to explain to professors and faculty that I can't provide documentation for what I'm doing, but like I promise that it's something super important for my family and for me.
Thank you, panelists. For time's sake, I'd like to give the opportunity to the audience to ask questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll let the panelists add their insights. So while they add questions, I do have a question. What is your favorite food with a Hispanic Latinx flavor, and can you describe it?
I don't think we have enough time for that question, to be honest, because it starts out with the bread my husband makes and how it makes the house smell, and I hate him for making it every time because it ends up with 2 loaves, and then if I don't give it away, I'm eating it. And my doctor gets mad at me. But he makes Cuban bread, and I think part of how we got here was COVID and being in Pennsylvania, where we cannot, like in our area, like you can't find certain foods that are like homely. We've had to learn how to make it and really make like that effort of how do you make this? How do you procure the ingredients where we're at? Just to be able, not just to have it for ourselves, but to share it with our kids. So we have 2 young daughters and we want them to taste these flavors, because otherwise we get in trouble with my parents. We're like, what are you feeding your kids? Right? They don't know the real flavors of Cuban cooking. So I'd say Cuban bread, especially warm and with café con leche.
If I may just say, going back to being ourselves and closing the loop for me, it's just like we need to and take away for the students in the audience, just doing what you know is right, Bethany, is what is gonna make you a happy student. And thank you for saying that, because we professors, we really need to get it together and realize that there are some things that you can never document. And and if something it doesn't go too well with academics because you're supporting your family, since we Latinos are persons of faith, God will take care of it one way or another. And it's a course or it's an assignment, or and hopefully, you have these people, student coaches or so, who can speak for yourself and say, hey, professor, hopefully we are accountable. We someone says, hey, Dr. Trejos, I talked to Bethany. She does have an excuse. So can you please consider? Let's not give up on this, because I know situations happen. And I mean, we've had 4 daughters in college, and it's not easy anyways, especially the way we've been raised. My mom says it, La familia lo es todo. And we've raised them like that, going to Costa Rica every year and so on and so forth. So that, and going back to the food point, because that's what this is about, is yes, let's cook what we like. Let's try to find ingredients. I remember I once ordered through the internet the banana leaves to make tamales. And of course, they came raw, and my husband had to cook them on the stove through the fire on the gas stove, so that we can make tamales. And we've raised these girls eating the Costa Rican food, and they crave it and they like it, and it makes us happy. So yes, let's just keep being ambassadors of who we are, including the food, of course, because it's a favor to us and to the people who surround us, for sure. Great question. Thanks.
going to quickly follow up with tamales, because even though they're different, the Mexican tamales are different from the Central American. Hey, even Southern Mexican tamales are different from Northern Mexican tamales, the ones that I'm more familiar with. That's just such a traditional winter flavor. But I want to quickly also mention that my wife and myself, papaya and other tropical fruits, avocado, the first time that we went to a Giant Eagle to buy avocados, we were so used to buying, 8 or 10 avocados, and it was like $1 each. What? We were used to paying less than $1 for a kilo of avocados, 8 or 10 avocados. So it was, and the lady that helped us out at that time did not even know what an avocado was. I'm talking ancient history, like 1997. Nowadays, everybody knows avocados and avocado toast and all that. But that's another thing that we miss a lot. The tropical fruits, well, Sam again, being a lot more prevalent nowadays. So I love the question too.
I can throw my 2 cents in. So for me, favorite food is empanadas. And similar to tamales and a lot of other, Latino, Hispanic dishes, there are nuances for every country, every region within the countries. And empanadas is one of those, the way in which you prepare the filling, even the way you cook it. So, for example, my family's from Argentina, and when we make empanadas, we bake them. But it's very often you will find an empanada that's fried as well. And the dough might be different. So for me, it's empanadas. I like all kinds of different empanadas, and it's also tied, yes, salsa and chimichurri, exactly. It's also tied into, I think, the idea that we've talked about with family, right? And like Bethany was highlighting, familismo. So familismo, this notion, it's very central cultural value. It involves dedication, commitment, and loyalty to family. And when I'm cooking empanadas, or maybe even if I buy one, I'm reminded of times in the kitchen when I've been cooking, with my family, of what this means for my family, of knowing kind of all of the struggles, all the commitments that they've instilled in me, and that they also went through to bring us here. So food can warm your belly, can warm your heart. It can bring about a lot of different feelings and notions. And as far as empanadas are concerned, there's so many good ones. I actually really like Colombian and Venezuelan empanadas as well, because they're gluten-free. Uh, so it gives you a different flavor. So yes, there's not enough time for food. We need another 30 minutes just for food. So
Thank you, panelists. Alina, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Bria, for your time today and moderating. Thank you all, to all of our panelists, to our speakers, to all of our participants who were able to join us today. I really want to extend a huge thank you to our panelists for their thoughtful insights and for sharing their experiences with us today. I know I've learned a lot, and it was just really nice to have us all together. Having these kind of conversations are really like a vital part of creating a more inclusive and empathetic community that we aspire to help create more with Penn West, but then also just beyond our immediate environments as well. We would also like to thank Chris LaFuria for his technical work on putting on this webinar together for us, and for all of his help in promoting the events. And we really do hope that today's discussion has inspired you to reflect on your own role in shaping the future, and how together that we can continue to drive meaningful change through these kind of educational conversations together. So thank you all for attending, and please keep an eye out for more events, both from the Office of DEI and beyond, as we continue celebrating Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thank you for having us.
Gracias,
Appreciate it.
cuídense.